Good afternoon. Welcome to our COTA, Nebraska World Language, COTA Special Interest Group, K-12 and NEBLA uh, guest speaker webinar. Today we have our,
Yes.
uh, all right, our friend Tom Welch. And this is how many times? I think this is the third time or fourth time we've
Yeah.
invited you. You have been requested frequently, We all love you, Tom.
Well, you know how happy I am to work with anybody, especially when it comes to Phil, but especially, I have a warm place in my heart for my fellow Nebraskans. So,
Yeah. Nebraska teachers. Actually, it's a great day for Nebraska here. So, today we have our two documents for Phil, facilitated interdependent language learning documents, the frequently asked questions, and also teacher requirement documents, both of them approved by my supervisor. So I'm going to share it out when later, not today. And also we have our first draft of Nebraska World Language Standards ready, and now it is out for public input. Thank you. And also, we are so excited to have Tom here. So, Tom, could you introduce yourself because you have so many hats, and I will miss some when I introduce you. Please take it away. Thank you, Tom.
all right. Well, thank you, Crystal, for the invitation. And I wanted to make sure, what time is our stop time?
It's normally 5:30, and
Okay. So we have about an hour and a half. All right, good. Well, it's very good to be with you today. And Crystal and I have known each other for a long time, as we are both members of the National Council of State Supervisors for Languages. I used to be the state supervisor in the state of Kentucky, but I have a very varied background, I guess. For those of you from Nebraska, I'm actually a graduate of Grand Island Senior High. And I have fond memories of growing up in Grand Island and in Nebraska. I still have a brother who lives in Lincoln, and I have a great niece who's actually a Spanish teacher in Lincoln. So it is really with a special place in my heart that I work with Nebraskans, including guys like Bob Fuhrer there, who's a board member in North Bend. Bob and I have known each other for several years now through a variety of projects and meetings that we've been involved with. But just quickly about my background, I started out, I went to the University of Nebraska for a year, and then I transferred to a small college in Kentucky and ended up getting an English and French degree there and taught English originally for 5 years in an urban school in Kentucky. And then I switched and was reborn. It was my renaissance, I guess. I was reborn as a French teacher in a small rural school just south of Lexington. And I did that for many years before I went to the Department of Education as the state supervisor, left that after several years and became the first principal of a brand new, very innovative public high school in our district. And so I was one of those rare birds who was a teaching principal. So we were on a block schedule, and I taught one class every day, every semester, as did my two fellow administrators, my two assistants. So that really gave me a lot of experience for working outside of my own little realm of languages, but also some real insights into the administrative situations that come up that sometimes teachers are unaware of a lot of the things that are going on. But as a result, I think I can be helpful to teachers when they say, oh, I'm having this problem with fitting Phil into a schedule or something like that. So, anyway, I did that. And then I also did a couple of other things with the state of Kentucky in my position as an administrator and as a language person until I finally started consulting on my own. I was able to retire from the department, from the state of Kentucky, and so I've been working on my own ever since. And I really am very, very bad at retirement. I just don't do it very well. And Dr. Ali Muller there is similar. She's officially retired from the University of Nebraska, but like me, she cares so much about kids and helping them learn that she can't seem to quit either. So I'm glad to be here with you. And Allie and I and Crystal, I mentioned, are part of this group called the Necessful, and we have a small subgroup called the Neural Network. And it's a group that for the last 7 years has worked on a variety of different projects. And as we've worked, we began to develop a way that we thought kids could learn languages much better. And it started out, we looked at a program in Wisconsin called FLS, which was Facilitated Language Studies, a very unique program that's been going on for 10 years. And I'm actually going to be going up to Wisconsin on Monday to visit the folks who are working with that up there. But then as we worked, we began to refine it a little more. And we finally hit on an approach that we call fill. So if you want, I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen. I think I've got things set up to do that. Oh, it doesn't let me go directly, so I'll have to just one moment. I'll do this and then this and then this. And now, can you see my screen all right? Okay, good. So here's my contact information. Feel free to get in touch with me. But I'm really happy to be here today, and we're talking about how to be ready for world language opportunities and challenges in the AI age. And so actually, I have had the opportunity because I've got more time than most people who are teaching or working in another position like Deanna. I've had the chance to really work quite a bit with AI. I sort of think, oh, yeah, everybody is working with AI, but I know that that's actually not true. And so I was wondering if you all could just take a few minutes and share with everybody about what things you have. I'm trying to make sure this works. Um, what things you've done with AI in terms of world languages? And Hannah and Martine and was it Ming? I saw. We're really going to be depending on heavily on you all to give us some ideas. And if you say nothing, I don't use it, I don't want to use it, that's all right too, and we'll talk about that as well.
Would you like us to share in the chat or
No,
orally?
just go ahead for now and just share here. Or if you'd rather share in the chat, that is certainly all right as well.
Okay. Well, I can tell you what we do. A lot of our teachers have been using AI to help. Um, we've been working on getting teachers used to AI and thinking that it's a tool, not this scary unknown entity. And so we've been working a lot with using it as a tool to help support you as a teacher. So we've been using it a lot for helping us plan, helping us to create different activities that we're having our students do, especially when we're coming up with ideas and thinking about AI as our tool and our partner to kind of help us be creative in that sense. And so we've been having a lot more success with our teachers moving in that direction recently.
Can you give maybe one specific example of something that somebody discovered how to do or
Yeah,
use?
actually, I have a great example from a teacher's growth last year. We had a teacher who was really resistant to technology in general, and would start to ask little questions like, how would I do this or how would I do that? And towards the end of the year, the things that they were putting together were, how would I best write a prompt for AI to kind of help create options for a choice board when we're talking about this set of vocabulary. and what are some of the different ways that they could show oral proficiency skills? What are some of the different ways that we could show, or different writing tasks that are a bit more creative than things that I was having them do before? We also had teachers look at just incorporating so many more resources into some of those ideas and activities that I don't know if they would have tried those things had it not been for the support that AI kind of gave them as a framework to build off of.
Great. And Deanna, what about in Kansas City? Are your teachers working with AI much or at all, or have you? Oh, she may have kind of stepped away and just listening. Uh, Deanna, would you mind telling us about what's going on in Kansas City, if anything, with
Sure.
use of AI in language learning?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. So a couple years ago, when ChatGPT really came on board, I developed a professional development around biases with artificial intelligence and what exactly these platforms could do for a classroom, but also the hazards. So when somebody is searching ChatGPT, for example, it will remember what has previously been logged onto the chat, whereas Copilot does not remember. And so the district decided to use Copilot for its ChatGPT as opposed to what we commonly refer to as ChatGPT. So we started early on in the world language department because a lot of teachers were hesitant, but I wanted to make sure that they realize that this is something that is going to take over our world, and I am ready to zoom up. So whenever that happens, I'm going to be very excited. But it's just interesting to me that when I was a kid and I would watch, Jetsons, for example, that literally our world has started resembling something that we thought was scientific fiction, and it's, come to pass. So I'm super excited. And although teachers were hesitant at first, they too have embraced it, and also they are the facilitators for their students to help them understand, the limitations and the difficulties that AI could produce. So we're really trying to help our students understand, for example, um, if if a student writes a paper and then you put that same paper into, or that theme into Copilot, what are the differences, and what do you think is better, and how could you improve both of them? And so really just embracing it. And I'm excited.
Well, great. I hope you will all feel free to just jump in anytime if you have a question or a comment or something else, because um, I really working with Phil has given me such a different approach to working with AI, because I've really begun to understand how to use it in terms of the process for language learning rather than just to create products. And so it's very exciting to me. If you want more information, there's always information about Phil that you can access. And this is just a screenshot from a little 7-minute video that we prepared about Phil. The URL for it is under there. You can take a look at that. And also, under that URL, oops, sorry, my fingers are kind of quick here. Um, you'll also see that link. There should be another link on there that will take you to a page of resources that Michelle, who's on the call today, has been primarily responsible for cultivating and adding in there. So always more things. So let's take a little bit deeper dive now. But I did want to say Nebraska is pretty much ahead of the game. There are not very many states who are as far along, and that's thanks to Crystal and her efforts. And just today, she had approval for the teacher requirements for Phil. And you might think, why do you need any different requirements for teachers? It really takes a special teacher to be able to help kids be successful in a Phil environment. Um, and it's the same way with a student. Not every student may be ready to jump in to a Phil environment, and that would be a mistake to expect them to do that. So, congratulations to Crystal. I'm sure maybe Crystal, you could drop the link to this into the chat so that people could get it and take a look at it. I imagine Deanna would be particularly interested since she is responsible for more than just herself as a teacher. Um, I started to think about this question, and Hannah gave us one example of what she had discovered that AI could do for students. How about anybody else who's thought, here's something I found out that it could do that I never would have expected?
Well, I could give one, Tom.
Sure.
Sure, I was doing a workshop for West Virginia, and focused on the teacher part of it, the teacher resources. And I wanted my thing was an intercultural activity that I was doing, and it was what is the typical discussion at the dinner table, starting with the students at their own, keeping track, but then let's go to Germany, for example. And what I needed a text. And so I went in and I wanted it the novice mid, a German text of father, of mother's daughter and son to actually have a discussion at the dinner table at that particular level that was aimed at my learners. And out came this wonderful resource that I could just use right then and there. Completely sounded very authentic. They could do it audio, they could do it by text. That was just a very simple tip of the iceberg, but the teachers were blown away. I said, you don't have to go searching on the internet. Just tell exactly what it is you need and what format you want it in, audio, video, text, and it shows it. And then the students can select, do they want to hear it? Do they want to see it? Do they, all that kind of thing. So just simple things like that save so much time for teachers. So I was aimed at the teachers there at that point. But then all the research-based activities you can do with them, highlight the words that jump out at you that about what deduction can you make, getting at that critical thinking level with them as well.
All right. Anybody else have one that they want to add in? I seem to have been able to close out completely my. Oh, here, I can open my presentation back up so we can get back on track here. Anybody else, though, with something they've discovered that their students are able to do or that they could do for their students by using AI?
But Tom, my context as a school board member is pretty different. I'm going to steal some time here, but I used chat to create our new superintendent evaluation that we're into the second year with now. And in the process of sharing that, some other board members got brave enough to use it too. One of them's into conservation. He's a big farmer. He and his brothers farm 10,000 acres. He writes grants for flood control, those sorts of things down here in the valley. And he said, well, it made me sound too smart. In the process of writing the grant, he told it what he wanted the grant to do, and he said, I told him, I said, Justin, I says, you can ask it to dumb it down, make it sound like you are, but Justin's also a former student. So that's I'm on the school board with four former students. So I'm still teaching, though I'm not in the classroom anymore. So, and I taught science when I was in the classroom. So, okay, I'm done. Thanks, Tom.
Sure. Well, I'll go ahead and talk a little bit more specifically. I think I'm back on this now about Phil, but I want to tell you part of where this comes from. And I've got what I call three guiding principles that really help me with the work and help me describe for others my approach. And one is absolute respect for the individual. So I know everybody's experience with AI varies a lot. And no matter where you may be coming from in terms of your experience, that's where you are. You're not ahead, you're not behind, you're exactly where you are. This was real insightful for me working with language students because in a typical program, you say, okay, a kid is in Spanish 2, they should know this, they should be able to do this, they should have studied this. Some of them have, and some of them haven't, right? And it's frustrating if we're always trying to put a student into a box that doesn't fit them. So, number one guiding principle, always respect the learner. They are where they are. Second thing is transparency of expectations. And this has been a real aha moment for me in working with proficiency and the proficiency guidelines. Because as I'll share with you, where we've seen this really be effective is when students can identify particular goals and they know what's expected. In a larger sense, in the Phil program that I'll talk a little bit about that we have going on right now in Delaware, Delaware has made it possible. The teacher there is using what's called proficiency-based credit. And this has been a real key for the success of Phil. In the state of Delaware, a student is expected to, every student has to satisfy graduation requirements that is 2 credits of a world language, or they can test out by proficiency. So, what the teacher, Ryan Allen, has done there is to say for the Phil class, in order to get a credit for this class, you must assess at the novice high level of expectation, which is what their requirement is in Delaware. Some states are higher, but in Delaware, that's what their graduation requirement is. So kids know as soon as they step into the Phil classroom that the expectation is that they will improve their individual proficiency to a level where they can be independently assessed at the novice high level. Now, I think we all know as teachers that we always have some kids who want to float by, who will just do what they have to get by, who will sit in the back of class, who maybe have other priorities. I mean, who knows? Maybe one of your students was preparing for the Olympics and really focused there and didn't have time to do their Spanish lesson or something. Um, but in Ryan's class, they always knew no matter what, they had to reach that expectation level of novice high. So let me pause right there and ask what your reaction might be to this idea that there was an expectation in the Phil class that they would reach a certain proficiency level as opposed to coming to class for 180 days or whatever it might be in your district.
I think it helps to give a lot of focus. I think for a lot of students, just like you said, it's kind of hard to have that end goal in mind. But I think too that as students learn and grow and keep growing, um, I think it's important to also tell them like this is your goal, but feel free to go beyond that, right? Because that's the power of what this is and what it can do. Um, but I think it's helpful to have a goal. And I know that in just the research that I've done about Phil and seeing some of Ryan's work and working with Crystal as well, I think that one of the big things that I appreciate is how much it focuses on the students as reflective learners and constantly being a part of that process. So those are my things.
Good, thanks. Well, let me go on and talk about my third guiding principle then. And I sometimes state it one way and sometimes another, but it boils down to respect for Vygotsky. And Vygotsky is the guy behind the whole concept of the zone of proximate development. So, Mr. Welch's motto was always go from what you know to what you don't know. I never want a student to be put into a situation where they aren't ready to succeed. Now, that may mean it takes a lot of work for them to succeed, but for instance, we don't put any student, we don't jump them from level one traditionally to level three because they wouldn't have what was necessary for them to be able to succeed. And with Phil, Phil handles so many of these things with such adeptness and exactitude by being able to focus on the learner. So we never ask a student to do what they're not capable of doing, but we're always encouraging them. I think that's sort of along the lines of what Hannah was saying there as well. So facilitated interdependent language learning is a learner-centered framework for increasing learner proficiency. Now, what do I mean by that? In most traditional classes, and I don't mean to step on anybody's toes, but in the traditional language classes that I've seen, the expectation is we're going to begin the year at unit one, let's say, and we're going to go through to unit 16 by the end of the school term. We expect students to keep up with that schedule. We have a variety of ways that we try to encourage that and help them. But Phil really blows that out of the window because Phil says, no, the focus is not on the chapter and getting kids through the chapter. The focus is on the individual learner and how do we help each individual learner be successful at their goals. And it's a real switch in mentality. But it's been very, very interesting. So let's see, I have trouble reading this with the way I've got the screen set up, but it's here's the definition: a learning community where learners pursue individual proficiency goals, support each other's progress, and use the facilitator and the resources, including AI, to expand their communicative ability rather than complete the same tasks at the same pace. This seems a lot like differentiated instruction, right? Well, I will tell you that my reaction to the term differentiated instruction is that that is a technique, and no offense to Carol Ann Tomlinson and the others who've worked on that, but for me as a teacher, the expectation that I would differentiate instruction for each individual learner was something that I saw coming out of about the third pit of hell, I think, because there was just no way with a student load of 90 or 100 or 120 kids that you could possibly do that. And so you couldn't, we did not have the tools before to be able to really establish a learning community where the focus was on the individual learner. We had to take them through same tasks, same timeline, but we don't anymore. And so we're going to look at Phil as a way to do that. So I use a lot of AI tools, but today is not about the tools. It's about the decisions that you make as an educator for your kids. And typically, a webinar will say, by the end of the webinar, participants will be able to, you know, talk about what fill is, they'll be able to define it, they'll be able to give 3 examples of classroom activity. Forget that, because if we go back to guiding principle number 1, it's absolute respect for the individual. So, what you get out of our brief time together today is going to be up to you. I'm not going to tell you what you are going to be able to do at the end because I don't know your background, I don't know your goals. What I will do is tell you what's available and how you can go about accessing it. So, I thought, what if we were to take a proficiency approach to using AI for world language challenges and opportunities? What? What do you mean, Tom? What if we took a proficiency approach? Well, that's what we want to do today, right? We want to talk about using AI for world language challenges and opportunities. So, how would we know if we were successful? How would you know what to do? So, first immediate use of I went into ChatGPT and I said, prepare a proficiency scale. I said, go novice low to advanced high with the 3 subcategories for each one of those that would address this issue. So let's take a look and see what it said. For novice low, oh, you experience AI primarily as a threat to academic honesty. I can remember when people didn't want students to use Google Translate, right? Because that was cheating. Many people look at AI the same way. And so your goal might be preserving traditional assignments and grading structures. Now, don't forget Tom's guiding principle number 1, respect for the individual learner. If that's where you are and you want to perhaps just use AI to help you as a teacher prepare better materials for your students, that's fine. If that's your goal, that's what we want to be able to help you be successful at doing. Novice mid, it might be this. You acknowledge that AI may help students, but you worry that it'll replace effort. And so you look for rules that talk about acceptable and unacceptable use. Or novice high allows limited AI assistance after instruction, measures success by whether students still complete expected tasks. Now, does this seem like a logical transference of skill going up the proficiency level working with AI? You have to get increasingly good at this. Well, let's look what intermediate low use may look like, and I'll just skip through these. Are you able to do these? I start looking at, for instance, that intermediate mid one, and I'm thinking, gosh, I bet Nebraska teachers and the others that we have joining us today, they're familiar to some degree with AI. They may not yet be at the place where I think Hannah was indicating that some of her students are, where after using AI, she's really asking them, or maybe it was Deanna asking students to really assess and evaluate and analyze whether that was a better response or not as good a response as the one they originally wrote. Very appropriate use. Or finally, I said go to advanced low, and I'll tell you in a minute why I've done it this way. So take just a minute and look at these. I don't want to reread them. My throat is getting a little dry anyway. Oh, yeah. Now we're really getting into some things that are hard to accommodate oftentimes in a traditional classroom. Especially look at advanced mid here.
This one really does look like the principles of Phil. These do, at least to me.
Yeah, we're getting much closer now into the sorts of things that you really find it very difficult to do in a traditional classroom, but which become very easy to facilitate in a Phil classroom. So this is one thing that we oftentimes talk about with teachers, and uh, I've got a few things in a list here, but I'm going to be very interested to see if you add any. But one of the reasons that the teacher in Delaware started with Phil is because they were a one language school. They offered Spanish and only Spanish. And that high school is about 1,000 students, I think. And, I'll take a minute to talk about Grand Island. When I was going to school in Grand Island, we had French and Spanish and German and Latin, right? Four languages. The last time I was looking, I decided to find out what languages Grand Island Senior High offers now to students. And despite the population having changed a great deal, the only language, I think, maybe Mandarin, but the only language really that they offer is Spanish. And that's the way for many districts. And I get that. But it reminds me a little bit of the old Henry Ford response when people said, "What color can I get my car in?" And he said, "Well, you can have any color you want as long as it's black," right? And for kids with languages, it's, "I want to learn another language." "Oh, you can learn any language you want as long as it's Spanish, because that's the only one we offer for a variety of reasons here at our school." So the primary reason for many people to look at a field approach is to meet the needs of the students. Students want to learn languages. They don't necessarily all want to learn the language that the school has to offer. So Phil allows for that to happen. Second thing, you can meet the needs for heritage language learners or community languages that you happen to have. And our colleague Joy here is the head of the Heritage and Community-Based Language Schools. She can tell you that there are many places around the country where there are heritage or community languages that aren't supported by the school system. And you know what? I get that. I understand that. And in the way we have always approached language instruction, that was defensible. But when we no longer look at language instruction, but we instead begin to look at facilitating increasing language proficiency, we change the conversation. So, Deanna, I see you kind of nodding your head there. Do you have people in Kansas City who speak languages other than English and Spanish?
Yes.
How many languages in Kansas City public schools?
I've heard different. So as far as academic in the classroom, we offer three. But as far as our student population, there are 54. But again, I've heard 60 as well as different languages. And I tried for a couple years to offer Swahili, um, which is our second most popular language spoken at home besides Spanish. And then, of course, English is still the majority. But we were not able to secure a teacher. So,
Yeah, it becomes so difficult in a traditional environment to meet those needs, like for Swahili, you certainly had students who wanted to maintain their home language or increase their proficiency in it. But I get it, you just couldn't do it. So one of the main reasons for adopting a Phil approach is to meet those needs that your learners come with. Another reason to look at a Phil approach is you can eliminate singletons. Now, here I'll draw on my administrative background. I know how hard it is when you're working with a master schedule to try to meet the needs of all your students. So you may have a student who needs an advanced math course and they want band and they want they have to be in US history because they're a junior, and you've got all these other things. And yet at the same time, the student wants to take German 3, and I've got 20 kids who want to take German 3, but that's all. So it's going to be one class. And then I end up with only 12 of those where I can make the schedule work. So I've got this singleton on my hands that is just very, very difficult and challenging to schedule. But with Phil, you don't worry about that. Phil, you don't worry about singletons. If you have just two people who want to learn Swahili or want to increase their proficiency in Hindi, that's fine. We can handle that in a Phil classroom. So you can eliminate those singletons. You don't worry anymore about, oh my goodness, do we have enough kids to be able, to offer a third year of Mandarin this year? Don't worry about it. Not with Phil. It also can be a bridge for DLI programs. So I know that dual language immersion is probably the most effective way that we've ever come across to help early learners learn another language. It's tremendous. I have nothing but good things to say for it. But my experience in looking from the outside is one of two things may happen. Either as the learners progress and get older, they don't want to stay with that language anymore, or they get to the high school and there's really not a good next course for them to take because your school doesn't offer US history in Mandarin, and can't. So with Phil, however, you can, using the proficiency guidelines and the can-do statements, you can help kids find the next thing that they should be doing to increase their proficiency, and it becomes a tremendous bridge for a DLI program. Another thing, in all honesty, that you can do with Phil is guard some faculty positions, because in a time of often at many schools a decreasing world language enrollment, you may end up with a teacher, especially in a large system, you may end up with a teacher where, gosh, I can't find enough students in your language at the level that they need to give you a full schedule. So do you want to teach 4 periods here and then float to another school for the other period so that you can still be teaching full time? That's we can do better than that for teachers. We can retain faculty positions by, for instance, Ryan in Delaware, he's on a block schedule. So he has 3 classes that he teaches every day. 2 of those are Spanish classes. The other one is a Phil class. So his schedule is Spanish. It's Spanish, I think this year, Spanish 2, Spanish 3, and Phil. So it's a helpful way to be able to retain faculty positions. Another exciting thing, I think, somebody had a question, or did I hit something? Or there may be one in the chat. Yeah, Bob, I hear your question about you find that required courses fill up most of the day and you have little flexibility for electives. Totally understand that. Phil can actually meet that from a variety of different perspectives, not only by being able to offer the language that you might not have, but to be able to offer the student the opportunity to really focus and specialize into something that they may need to. We'll talk about that. The other one I was going to talk about, though, besides many others, is language layering. Now, when I was my last year of teaching, or the last couple of years of teaching French, I had some really great kids. And I was very close friends with the teacher across the hall, who was a Spanish teacher. And she'd talk about her kids, I'd talk about my kids and how good they were doing. And we finally thought, you've got some really good kids. We could get those kids to both the AP level in two languages, Spanish and French, if we worked with them differently. So for our last few years, we would take students, for instance, who were ready for my French 3 class, who would start in her French 2 or in her Spanish 2 class, because by the end of that semester, they were already caught up because of their understanding of language learning. They could catch up quickly. So we fiddled around with language layering. Phil, it becomes much different. Kids may want to learn more than one language. They may want to not go to the AP level in the language that they start in. Maybe they want to start in Spanish and then switch to French and end up in Russian. It's something that we couldn't really do before, but with Phil we can. And I will tell you also that this year in Ryan's Phil class in Delaware, he has kids in his Phil class learning, gaining proficiency in more than one language. I think he's got one in French, who also now is layering on German. But let me stop here and take a breath, and you all can jump in and let me know what your comments are so far. What's hitting you? What makes sense? What are you confused about? I'll even stop share for a minute.
I love the idea of language layering, because it's true. And I think if I think back to um, just like why I got involved in language and the opportunities that I had. I was a dual language student, so I had all of my classes in English and Spanish, but I was really interested in learning Chinese. And so, thankfully there was opportunities to do that. And I got a scholarship to go study Chinese, and I had the opportunity to take classes when I came back. But I think at the time when I told people that, it was kind of, people looked at me weird, like, you already speak another language, so what? And I'm really glad that I kept to that, because that's what opened my eyes and opportunities to other languages too, that I got to study, here and there and wherever the opportunity came up. But I think if there would have been an opportunity to be able to do that in my earlier life, I absolutely would have taken it and ran with it, right? And I'm glad that I could kind of get that later on, but if we have the space to do it and the framework to do it, I love that idea. And thinking about all of our students who come in with so many languages already, I think about how are they strengthening the languages that they already bring in, so that they're not prioritizing others and neglecting others. So I think that's a beautiful opportunity for them too.
Yeah, I really like the idea of encouraging kids to be proficient in languages. And sometimes I think, what if I'd had Rick Steves, if you know who that is, the travel guy. What if I'd had Rick Steves walk into my classroom as a ninth grader, and I had decided for him that his goal should be to get a 5 on the AP French exam when he's a senior. And if it were Rick Steves, he'd be more likely to say, hey, wait a minute. That doesn't really look like success for me. What I want to do is reach intermediate mid in 4 languages. Well, I would have said, "Oh, that's great, Rick, but there's not much I can do with you except help you with your French." But today, a language teacher with a fill opportunity could say, hey, Rick, that's great. I can help you do that. I know how to help people increase language proficiency. So we'll start you out in the language that you choose. We'll help you set what your goals are for that. And then we'll continue for there. And you can begin to add on languages at the level that you want in the way that you want. It's just amazing to me the opportunities that we have to help kids in ways that we didn't before. Any other comments about the language layering or any of the other possibilities with Phil? I see I probably better move on a little more quickly here. Gosh. Um, so next, let's see if we can go on from here. Oh, all right, so let me tell you what's going on with the Phil class that we've got that is the most experienced. So, outstanding teacher who was a Spanish teacher, 10 years, taught Spanish. His kids wanted to learn other languages. Dr. Allen, why can't I take French? Dr. Allen, I want to learn some other language. I want to take German because I've got German heritage, and he couldn't do anything. So he started, and we worked together for a year before he began to offer Phil. But the first term, he had 23 students in the Phil class taking, I hate to use the word taking language. He had 23 students who were determined to become proficient in 10 different languages. So imagine this as a teacher. He's got 23 kids learning 10 different languages in his classroom. Before AI, before a fill approach and the structures that we've got, that would have been a nightmare for me as a teacher. It's how do you organize that? Well, the first thing you remember is he's not teaching 10 different languages. He's helping kids learn 10 different languages, but he's not teaching them 10 different languages. So they're all moving at an individual pace along their lines, meeting their individual goals. And you think, isn't that a nightmare to handle? How could the kids really learn anything? Well, I will tell you what the experience has been because they had a proficiency-based credit. Most of those students, he's on a block schedule, they met only one semester. After one semester, the majority of those students tested in an independent assessment. He was using the stamp test from Avant. Most of his students tested at or above the novice high level. So in other words, in one block schedule semester, his kids had met a requirement that normally takes at least 2 credits, 2 semesters. Now, what are the implications for that? Why would that matter? What's it mean if you shorten the amount of time in which a kid meets a requirement?
Saves money.
Yeah. In what way does it save money? I think that was Allie.
I'm going to let somebody else think about that.
Yeah.
Well, I posted that earlier as a school board member. That's one of the things in Nebraska we're having an uproar about property taxes. And the governor says that we're irresponsible with our levies and those sorts of things. School's inefficient. If we can get it done in a semester, why make the kid go two? So not only does it penalize the student, but it also penalizes the district because we're duplicating service, or not duplicating, we are providing services that are no longer needed. So it's like
Exactly.
you're on a round of medication, and all of your symptoms have gone, you've run out of the medication, but no, you got to go fill the prescription again. So that's one of the things and Tom knows this too. We talk a lot about redesigning just the design of school, and this is a great model, for doing a redesign. So I'll shut up.
And lots of opportunities for the kids to take another language or move up the proficiency ladder quicker. Take AP, for example.
Or take something else.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe a
another
kid,
language.
yeah, maybe a student's only goal was, I want to get my graduation requirement out of the way because I'm really interested in science and I want to take more science courses. As much as I would like the student to continue in languages, if you tell them, listen, Maria, I've got a way for you to do that. In the Phil experience, you're in charge of your learning. I can help you as a professional. I can help you meet your proficiency goals, meet your requirement, and open up your schedule so that you can take another science course. Now, of course, as Ali suggests, we're going to encourage them to take a language or to continue with the language that they're taking. But it's tremendous if you can help. But what about kids on the other end who take longer, right?
Mm-hmm.
You stop giving Fs, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're learning on a proficiency scale, you're always moving forward. And we can talk some, if we have time, about the difference between our traditional deficit-based model as opposed to an asset-based model of assessment. But Phil is all asset-based. The only thing the teacher cares about is helping the student meet their next goal.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got it laid out so well with the actful, necessful, actful, can-do statements that it provides the skeleton of the structure for the student to work in a very consistent way and replace a traditional curriculum that wasn't designed for the learner. That was designed for the teacher. And
And it helps them develop self-determination too, when they can see their actual progress, what they can actually do with language. Wow. Then their motivation is probably, I think I'll take more of this. I didn't know I was capable of this. Because the more they get to choose and have choices, like you've pointed out, Tom, the more motivation, the higher the learning motivation, and the higher the proficiency level, and they'll continue to grow. And well, the whole idea of getting that self efficacy too, that they can do this, and building that reflection about what do I need to do this better. Those are the kinds of things, of the skills that they need to succeed in the world today.
And, we always talk about wanting to help students become independent learners, right?
Right.
And yet we never really give them the opportunity to learn independently. We're always telling them what to do. That's my beef with instruction. We can have kids who become really effective at responding to instruction, but their learning may be very minimal. And then once nobody is any longer there telling them what to do, they're not going to do anything, right?
My motto has
Why
always
would they?
been, they should be asking questions, not me. They should be asking questions, and then Phil allows them to find the resources to answer them, which gives them that whole sense of I can do this by myself.
Yeah. Well, another thing that goes along with that, with this last point I've got on the side about the assessment results, Remember, I didn't say every single one of Ryan's students made it to the novice high level. There were some who didn't. And you know what those students did? They kept working on their own after the course was over so that they could be reassessed and see whether they had met the requirement. And indeed, that is what happened. So I don't know how much experience, maybe in Nebraska it's different from the way it was in Kentucky, but I know my students rarely would continue on their own if I wasn't there telling them what to do. But with proficiency as the focal point, students always know what they can be doing. And the can-do statements are so good because they cover the variety of different modes, and they can figure out what they want to do and do it. It's pretty revolutionary. So, as we said, it's an approach and it's not a model because every single teacher is probably going to do Phil a little bit differently. You may have a teacher who wants, well, in fact, Ryan is going to be using a Phil approach with his Spanish students. So he'll have one Phil classroom with kids learning many different languages, but he's also using a Phil approach with his Spanish students, but it's no longer a group where they are marching along at the same place with the same resources and materials. Now it's personalized. The students are following the proficiencies. They're looking at their can-do statements and setting their goals that way. Um, Also, Phil, we've seen now we've got one educator at an elementary school in Texas who is beginning to use a Phil approach. And then we also now have three programs, I think it is, Michelle, already going at the higher ed level with a Phil approach.
Well,
Do you
we've
want to
got one
jump in
that's
there?
already set up at the University of Washington, and then in Wisconsin, or Michigan, they're working on one that will start pretty soon, and we've got another meeting about one, I think, tomorrow.
Yeah. So from elementary school to higher ed, Phil can help meet students' needs. And if a teacher said, you know, there's some things about this Phil approach that appeal to me, but I'm not ready to jump in, you could also do it with just one chapter in the traditional course you're already teaching. If you said, I just want to experiment with it a little bit, I want to help figure out what the proficiencies would look like for this chapter, I want to set some can do statements that would allow students to work through. Um, that's very possible. And it may seem kind of mysterious about how to do that for a single chapter to get started, but as Crystal, I think, will tell you, I'm here, Michelle's here, Ali is here. We want to help. So if you are a teacher who said, "Hey, you know, I was kind of interested in what you were saying, but you know, what would it look like? I've got, you know, chapter 7 coming up next week. What would it look like if I had my students use a Phil approach for that?" And man, thank goodness for AI because AI can take the stress out of trying to set those proficiency levels, trying to identify what the chapter is really after, help you establish can-do statements, and then even give you some guidance about how to help students track those. So it's very adaptable because it focuses on the individual learner. That's what it boils down to. So I think it's also important here to talk about the shift from deficit-based to asset-based assessment. In most world language classrooms, teachers get frustrated because they say, I can't get my students to talk. And we know why students don't want to talk in a language classroom. Well, somebody tell me. I'll pretend like I don't know. Why don't kids want to talk in a language classroom? Why do you have some kids who just want to stay quiet unless they're called on?
I think we've all
Fear of
had
making
that.
a mistake.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, you're afraid you're going to make a mistake. Oh, I was a horrible language student when I first started. I was very reluctant. I did not want to make mistakes in front of my peers, in front of my teachers. Oh, they'll think I'm stupid. They'll know I didn't study like I should have. There's so many reasons. Part of that is because you feel like as a student, you're always looking over your shoulder because you're afraid the teacher is getting ready to ding you, right? Or you take a quiz. How do you know if you were successful on a quiz or a test? Well, you look at your deficit. You say, oh, the test was worth 100 points. I got an 81. So they've counted up everything I didn't do right, how far I was from doing what I should. That was my deficit. In Phil, we forget that. We know that education research tells us that one of the most essential parts about learning is making mistakes. I just read another article on that the other day. You can't learn without making mistakes. And yet, we don't have a method in most places to honor that. We don't have a way to make it where you can be free to make mistakes and learn from them. With a fill approach, if a learner says, oh, here's what I'm working on as my next can do statement, and so let me give you an example. I'm going to turn in a writing sample to you, and the writing sample isn't up to par. The teacher doesn't take points off for that. The teacher says, hey, first of all, Michelle, why don't you run this? This is what I would do. Why don't you run this through one of the AIs and ask it where you didn't come up to the proficiency level that you were aiming for? Because frankly, AI knows so much about the proficiency guidelines now that it could tell them that. But this next thing is the facilitator is going to be saying, hey, Hannah, yeah, it looks like we've identified some errors here in this. What would it take to correct those? Let's keep working until you get that at the level that you want. No need for counting off points. It's always, what can I do better? And to me, it changes that trust relationship between the learner and the student because the student is no longer looking over their shoulder thinking, oh, what's he going to do if I make a mistake? What'll he think if I fail this test? It's always the only thing I care about is how do I help you take your next step, right? Totally changes it. Give you a quick
Like like Edison said, I failed my way to success.
yeah, yeah. And that's what I've never really understood about how the status quo was set up. How even though we know you have to make mistakes to learn, we've never had a good way in education, the way we practice it, to be able to honor that. Um, Ryan, I'll tell you a quick aside. There was a student in his class who ended up getting a 0 on two parts of his assessment in the oral part of his assessment. And when the results came back, the evaluation said suspected of outside assistance or something like that. And Ryan talked with the student, and what had happened was he said, I'm afraid I'm not going to do very well. So I wrote out the answer on this part for this question and then gave that. And the assessment was able to detect that. He ended up with a 0 for that part of his assessment. The ironic thing was the third sample, he got a novice high. So he would have been all right. But this way, he didn't succeed in getting to evidence that he was at the novice high level, so he had to continue. But think about that was what that does when Ryan's not saying, hey, you cheated, you're getting a 0 for this test, or you're taking a 0 in the class. He says, hey, listen, you really didn't need to do that. We know that you had outside assistance on this. Let's just keep working so you can pass that part of the assessment, which the student did a short time later. So it's when you're looking at an asset-based approach where the learner knows the only thing the teacher wants to do is help me take my next step, you completely change the game. So what do you need? And Crystal is taking care of a lot of this in the document that she's just had approved. First of all, you need a facilitator who knows how to help kids acquire proficiency in another language. So you need a facilitator who knows second language acquisition. You can't take a paraprofessional who may be very skilled at overseeing a study hall and put them in charge of a fill class. Just will not work. You need somebody who knows about second language acquisition. You also need students who are familiar with proficiency and the proficiency guidelines. So Ryan starts out every semester with at least a week where they're just looking at the proficiency guidelines and the necessful, actful, can-do statements. The next thing you need are weekly goal setting sheets or a way for kids to set goals weekly. Now, Dr. Moeller, who's with us today, did some incredible research on the impact of goal setting for student achievement, working with Spanish classrooms throughout Nebraska. She saw firsthand and has the research that shows how important it is for kids to set goals. With Phil, we take that a step farther, and we have the student identifying from the published list of the can-do statements and the proficiency guidelines what their goals are. And then the student and the facilitator agree on what the evidence is going to look like for achieving that goal. And for one student, it may be writing something. Another one, they may be preparing a little video that they narrate. It can be all sorts of different things. But because you're using a common proficiency guideline, you can tell whether they have met that evidence or not. And that keeps them working as well. That keeps them on task. So I've walked into Ryan's classroom. It's not chaos. You have all these different groups of kids, some doing one thing, some doing another, some are on their phone. What? Yeah, because they're using their phone as a help to being able to meet their goal for the week. It's really amazing what the kids will begin to do once you give them permission. Yeah, so here's what the weekly goal sheet looks like for Ryan's class. So I know this is kind of small. Crystal can make this available to you or drop me a line. I'll send you a copy of it. So they take each of the days of the week, and this is something that Ryan prepared. So he says, write the days of the week in your target language here. So because he's working in all these different languages, then he has them go through the can-do statements and identify their goals. And then notice what he has done here. Did you reach your goals? Why or why not? How do you know you reached or didn't reach them? What worked and didn't work? What's something that confused you this week? What could you do better? What could Dr. Allen do to help? And what do you want to try next week? Wow, that's quite a change from a traditional classroom where it's the teacher setting the goals, it's the learner responding to what the teacher has said. let me pause here for a little bit of reflection. This was supposed to be a group of teachers and a big mirror, but I don't think it did very well. I would kick this back to AI. But tell me, we have about 10 minutes left. I know I've kind of been perhaps all over the place with this. I'd like to stop and just let's have some dialogue about what appeals, what doesn't appeal, what questions you have. And I'll just stop this for now. What would you need in order to start Phil in your school or in your program or in a class that you're trying to thinking about working with?
Well, Tom Crystal just posted that ESU2 is one of them that's expressed interest, and that's our service unit.
Oh,
So I need to do some contacting with the principal and maybe with Ms. Rhea and see what we can do to make that happen here in our district. So I'm I have some work to do.
well, I'm happy to help. Be part of a conversation. It's sort of like working with Deanna. I'm sure she has questions about the particular situation in Kansas City public schools, and the best way to work is individualized, right? That's one of the hallmarks of a Phil approach. It can be personalized and individualized.
Um, I can kind of share where we're at with everything. So
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we've found to be a challenge is just making sure that everything is set up so that we're setting our teachers and our students up to be successful, because I see so much potential and so much like uh just excitement when it comes to Phil. And so I think that for us it's really about doing it right so that we and going slow so that we can go far, kind of mentality. I know too for us we are hoping to start a Phil structure using one class first so that we
Hmm.
can really focus on one thing and do that really well before expanding and broadening. We also really wanted to focus on indigenous languages. And so as we're going through the process of organizing everything and making sure that everything is ready and set for students to be successful, we also are working with different tribes to make sure that we're being respectful of their language and encouraging kind of a mutually um, helpful and sustainable system so that we can really make sure that while we're letting students who are relearning their language, making sure that the tribe is also kind of in the driver's seat for that, just so that we're respectful of that language and the history that comes with that, but also making sure that whatever we have our students doing is going to be beneficial for the tribe and some of their language revitalization efforts that they've been doing. So I know we have been in conversations. I have another call set up tomorrow morning. So this is just going to be a great, like 12 hours of exciting ideas just going through my head. Like, how am I ever going to sleep? I don't know, but it's going to be exciting and it's going to be good.
Great.
We,
And
Hannah, we actually have, Nancy Wadeen Engen. I don't know if you know her, but she's been working for years with developing teachers among Native Americans at various reservations. It would be great if we could get one of those teachers to facilitate that field program. So
Yeah.
it would, I know the sensitivity there of someone else coming in. I'll send to Crystal the contact information for her, and maybe you can make a connection there. We'll see.
Thank you. Yeah, that'd be super helpful.
And Hannah, you hit on a really important point, and that is making sure that people are ready before you start. Don't forget my one of my guiding principles is never put a person into a situation where they're not ready to be successful.
Right.
And so the last thing you would ever want to do is to assign a teacher randomly to teach a section of Phil, right?
Right.
Oh, we don't have a full schedule for you. So I heard about this Phil thing, and you can find some resources online, and you're going to teach that starting next week.
Right. No.
That
And I
would be
think,
something we really, really would strongly discourage.
yeah, no.
You have
And
to be ready.
I love that you said that too, because that's kind of the conclusion I came to kind of independently, thinking about how do we make sure that the quality is there, and that the respect is there. And so, yeah, and I said to everyone involved right at this stage right now, as we're kind of compiling and putting things together, I said, we really need to be strategic about who is ready to do something that's really innovative
Yeah.
and ready to do something a little bit differently, and who's ready for that learning and who's ready to be the learner themselves and kind of ready for that new I guess, dynamic of really just being a facilitator, not a lecturer, and someone who knows that this language is not theirs and they need to be able to go with that, and be, just super respectful of the people whose language it is. So I think all of those have been big conversations that we've been happening. So I love that you said that too, because at least we're all thinking on the right track.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And also when we try to prepare teachers for our field program, we are talking about, oh, we only start from one class, but facilitation is actually now considered as a pedagogy. So we can train all teachers. You know, every teacher will benefit more or less if they get some training orientation on how to facilitate learning in their what language classroom, because with AI is not going away. With AI become more and more popular, of course teachers will take on I have to say go more to a directional facilitator of learning instead of instructions, the provider of knowledge.
and frankly, it becomes just very exciting from the facilitator's point of view to have the success that you see with these varied learners achieving their goals in the way they want, and it can be through their personal lens. And I know we're almost out of time, but I'll tell you a quick story that Ryan passed on, and that was about a student who was taking not taking, who was learning Japanese, and he was filling out his weekly goal sheet, and his goal was something about learning colors. And Ryan said, that's not really much of a goal according to the can-do statements or anything else. He said, what did you want to learn colors for? And he said, well, actually I play a lot of Minecraft, and I wanted to be able to use it for talking about the colors of Minecraft. And Ryan was like, well, your goal isn't colors. Your goal is being better at playing Minecraft in Japanese. And so the kid was like, you mean I can do Minecraft and learn about Minecraft in Japanese at school? And Ryan was like, yeah, look at the way that fits in with your weekly goal and what the can-do statements are. And you can meet the can-do statements in a lot of different ways. And so, yeah, well, how much more excited do you think that student was about class, knowing he was going to be able to play Minecraft, but he was going to do it in Japanese, right? So pretty exciting. And I saw that Deanna had a question about money. Um, can you jump in real quickly, Deanna? I'd love to be able to give you a cogent answer about that.
Yes. So, what are the ramifications for that? Could you
For
expand?
financially for a Phil class,
Yes.
very minimal. Now, there may be some unanticipated ones, but you're not talking about new textbooks because everything is personalized. You're not talking about um, hopefully you wouldn't be hiring somebody else. You would already be using one of your existing teachers as the facilitator for the Phil class. And, really, Ryan and I have talked about this a few times. And to switch to a Phil approach is really not something in which finances are a barrier. If you can think of things, well, what about, don't you have to do this or do that? I'll be happy to talk about it. But really, you can oftentimes, if your students have access to AI, you can come up with all the materials that you need, or they can learn to come up with all the materials that they need. Because you just have a completely different set of resources. You're not providing the resources. The
Okay.
student
Okay.
is
Thank you,
learning how to
Tom.
find those.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
I think we need to budget for assessment for students.
Yes. Thank you. Right. And that is very important. So, working with one of the assessment companies of your choice, you figure out that. And we could talk more about that later, but I think that independent assessment is one of the keys to making this work. This can't be, oh yeah, Hannah had this new course called Phil, and she gave a test at the end, and oh, everybody did so well. And no, it's got to be verified. And if you're using an outside assessment, then you've got the proof that nobody can argue with about whether it works or not. But you do need to be able to budget for that. Thank you, Crystal, for reminding me. Any last questions or comments? I know we're right at the end of our time here. Um, it's been a wild and crazy day for me. But I hope this has been helpful. And please reach out to me if you have individual questions. I don't care how small they might be, or if you have large global questions that you're still wondering about with Phil and the approach. Please take a look at that little video that we did. I think that gives you a good overview. But you've got a real group of supporters here in Michelle and Ali and the rest of our neural network people who've helped design the Phil approach. And uh, I I think we can make it work for Nebraska and elsewhere.
Yeah, and also I would like to share. Actually, me and Hannah, we wrote an article about how to, the title is Facilitate Proficiency Growth in AI Enhanced Classroom. So it is accepted to 2026 Central State Report. We are talking about it from a more like administrative perspective because both Hannah and me are administrator kind of role. So it is coming out. I hope it will help all of us a little bit
Good,
at least.
good. And if you go to the resource page, there are some other resources there as well, including a new article that Avance Magazine did on it. There's a podcast that I think just dropped today where Ryan and I were interviewed. So I'll make that available, and Hannah or Crystal can send that out as a wrap up to this. But I sure have enjoyed talking with you about Phil. There's not a day that goes by that I don't get up excited about working with Phil. And now we're starting to work with a Phil approach in other disciplines as well. So, yeah. All right. Yeah,
You,
Bob, I actually showed how to use Phil for a biology I think it was a biology class, in my couple of my recent Substack posts, where you can have it identify what's really going on and then set up the proficiency levels and have it produce the can-do statements. Science is right around the corner, buddy. All right.
Thank
Crystal,
you. This is
anything else?
great. Thank you.
Sure. All right. See you all.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Have a nice evening. Thank you. Tom, oh, okay. Just a minute. Let me stop recording.
I can.